Liam's Map. This two-time Grade 1 winner posted 6 consecutive 100-plus buyer figures, including a 1:14 in the Grade 1 Woodward Stakes, the fastest winning time in more than a decade. An $800,000 yearling, he never finished off the board in 8 starts, winning 6. In his final race, this great colt set the track records at Keeneland in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. All this adds up to a world-class stallion at a world-class stallion farm.
Hi everybody, Dan Illman, Matt Bernier. The pre-entries for the Breeders' Cup World Thoroughbred Championships are in. In this edition of Breeders' Cup Focus, we're going to take a look at the $6 Million Classic at 1.25 miles. And our Breeders' Cup Classic coverage is presented by Liam's Map at Lanes End Farm. Let's take a look at the list of pre-entrants ranked by Daily Racing Form National Handicapper Mike Watchmaker's preliminary morning line. One horse on this list has the Classic as a second preference. That's 20-to-1 shot City of Light, who is hoping to run in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Accelerate Matt has been, listen, the best handicap horse all year long. He has really blossomed for trainer John Sadler. He is the morning line favorite on Watchmaker's line. I am intrigued in your opinion of his most recent start, the Grade 1 Awesome Again Stakes, where he took the measure of a returning West Coast. Many pundits watched that race and immediately afterwards said, "Give me West Coast in the Classic." Let's watch the race. Do you concur with that assessment?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think that just sort of discredits or discounts what Accelerate has accomplished this year. All he does is go out and run big race after big race. Now, I'll admit, I wasn't particularly impressed with this effort here from either he or West Coast, to be honest with you. But at the same time, I don't think I'm going to let one race totally dissuade me. I think he's the kind of horse that he deserves to be the favorite based on the overall body of work. I think if he shows up with his best race, he's probably just better than the rest of these horses at this point. But the elephant's in the room. John Sadler in the Breeders' Cup, John Sadler outside of Southern California. It would be foolish to just ignore those numbers because the sample size is large enough where you can draw some conclusions. I think he deserves to be the favorite. I don't know that I want to bet him at 3-to-1.
West Coast had the ready-made excuse in the Awesome Again that it was his first start since the Dubai World Cup, and Bob Baffert was simply using it as a means to an end, with the end beating the Breeders' Cup Classic at Churchill Downs. As for Accelerate, he threw a little bit of a fit behind the gate, which really isn't like him. He didn't break very well, but he just continues to get the job done. Maybe in more workmanlike fashion than his brilliant effort in the Pacific Classic and then the Gold Cup at Santa Anita, but it's hard to knock anything this horse has done this year, and as you say, he is a deserving favorite in this race. Let's take a look at a couple of interesting 3-year-olds. We'll go back to the Travers at Saratoga. Catholic Boy made a successful turf-to-dirt move, and if there's one thing he wants, it's the 1.25 miles. Let's go back to the Travers. Now, this was a race, Matt, where there really wasn't any closing going on. Mendelssohn, who is also pre-entered for the Breeders' Cup Classic, is on the lead. Catholic Boy hounded him throughout. Catholic Boy handles Mendelssohn very comfortably.
Yeah, he certainly does. And I think this is just a product of a horse that the jury was out. What surface did he actually prefer? He's very capable on both, but I think he actually might be slightly better on the dirt. I think the thing that you need to question or consider now exiting the Travers, just based on speed figures, both of those horses, they're going to need to improve if they're going to run with the likes of Accelerator, West Coast, or any of the older horses. I don't think it's impossible to think that they take a step forward. I think it is also worth noting, especially with a horse like Catholic Boy, he missed a little bit of time because of an illness, and usually you don't want any sort of hiccups leading into the biggest race of their career.
As for Mendelssohn, he has utilized speed tactics pretty much all this year. He came from a little bit off it last year to win the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. Do you see a situation where he gets a much better pace scenario than what he received last time out when he was chasing the fast diversified through blistering fractions in the Jockey Club Gold Cup?
Well, I really felt like one of those instances where you won the battle, but you lost the war in the Jockey Club simply because he was up there, and he stuck around toward the end. I don't think they're going to go as fast. I believe that the half mile in that day was just a shade under 46, or roughly right around 46 seconds. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he had a half closer to 46 and 47 here on Saturday afternoon. I think there's a real scenario where he works at a better trip. I won't argue with anyone, though, that says until he proves that he can handle better horses on dirt going this sort of distance, I'm going to sit back and watch. But I tell you what, you might get a decent price on him this time around.
This prep for 3-year-olds obviously didn't get as much prep as the Travers, but the winning Beyer's speed figure, it was pretty fast, actually faster than the Travers Beyer. Let's go back to the Pennsylvania Derby. Bob Baffert in the winner's circle with McKinsey. And this wasn't easy for McKinsey as we take a look at the stretch drive. He was coming off of a long layoff. He was going 1 1/8 for the first time. And he was facing some sharp foes, including the runner-up Axelrod, who was also pre-entered for the Breeders' Cup. 2 questions for you. One, do you believe this 107 Beyer speed figure, or do you think it is a bit inflated? B, do you think either one of these 2 horses wants 1.25 miles?
I think the figure, to me, I have no problem with it. I think it's very, very within, let's say, very much within the realm of possibility with a horse like McKinsey. If he earned a 101 back as a 3-year-old in March, there's no reason to think that after 6 months gone away with just that natural maturation physically that he could move up to a 107, and I think he could take another step forward. You can make the argument that he is as talented as any of these other runners in here naturally. I'm not totally convinced about him at 1.25 miles. I think 1.125 miles, you got to start to wonder going past that. And again, really, it'll boil down to, I think he's going to take some money in this race. And you got to make a decision. Do you totally trust him going this distance? And if you don't, you look elsewhere. As far as Axelrod is concerned, I don't think the distance is going to be an issue for him, even though you look at the pedigree at face value and you'd say, I can't imagine you getting another 1/8 of a mile. My sort of piece with Axelrod, I wonder if this is 1 year too early. I wonder if as a 4-year-old he could end up being one of the bosses of this division. I think he can run well in this race. I just don't know if he's quite ready for this step up.
It is a fair point, though, that Axelrod did improve 12 points in the Pennsylvania Derby to a career best. He really has looked visually impressive since kind of being dropped in class a little bit. The Indiana Derby, the Smarty Jones to get his confidence up. This is a horse that I'm a little bit concerned about the 1.25 miles, but if you believe a horse like Accelerate maybe has had one too many, and the Awesome Again was maybe a sign that he's dropping out of form, and that West Coast is the kind of horse that finds one better occasionally. We've seen that in some pretty good ones in Gunrunner and obviously Accelerate. Maybe this is the year for Axelrod. You know he's going to be a giant price. I've always been a fan of that horse. Let's talk a little bit about the intriguing European entrant, and this is Roaring Lion, and all he's done is bank $3.5 million in his career. He has won on a synthetic surface overseas in the past, and 1.25 miles is no issue. They cut him back to 1 mile for his most recent start. We'll take a look at that right now. The Queen Elizabeth II Stakes. John Gosden is a master trainer. He is taking a big shot here with Roaring Lion in the Classic. He will not run this horse, he says, if the track condition comes up sloppy. Roaring Lion has the class to compete with these kind of horses, but you have very large concerns about the surface switch.
Well, I mean, I just look at it at face value and I realize that you've got Street Sense on the bottom, but I would challenge anyone. Name me the best horse that Kitten's Joy has ever had to run on the main track. I can't think of anyone that might be slightly better than a listed sort of stakes type. And that's not supposed to be a knock against Roaring Lion. The talent is there, but I just, to me, even in a year like this, where if you want to think that there are potential sort of hiccups for some of the main contenders, this just happens to be a year where I'm not terribly interested in a horse like this. I think any sort of price below 15 or 20 to 1 is a terrible underlay.
It has been the year for Turf to Dirt, however. Yoshida making his dirt debut, a very impressive winning one at Saratoga. Of course, Catholic Boys Travers coming after his victory in the Belmont Derby. Let's talk about Mind Your Biscuits. This is his first preference. Mind Your Biscuits, a 2-time Dubai Golden Shaheen winner, and he kind of got that monkey off his back last time out by winning around 2 turns at Churchill Downs. He'll still have to go another furlong. His pedigree doesn't say it. You look at his overall running lines, you would think he's probably better at sprints and middle distances. But something tells me that this horse's class and determination could easily pull him through in a race like the Classic. Boy, throw him out at your own risk.
He just shows up and runs good race after good race, and really it doesn't matter what the distance is. 6 furlongs, 7 furlongs, 1 mile, 1 1/8 now. We'll find out about 1.25 miles. The thing I thought that was, as let's say, the most intriguing part of Mind Your Biscuits coming out of that Lucas Classic, he didn't beat much as far as the field was concerned. That part doesn't really bother me. It was the way that he did it and the way that he galloped out. He galloped out with some gusto. Makes me think that the distance isn't going to be a problem. And I think many people go back to that Whitney and they say, oh, well, that was proof that he couldn't get the 1 1/8. Keep in mind, Diversify freaked out that day, and there was that giant thunderstorm that came before the race. I'm not going to hold that against Mind Your Biscuits. I think there's a real scenario where you're looking at a horse. If we have questions about the prep for Accelerate and West Coast, you don't know about Roaring Lion with the surface switch, maybe the 3-year-olds aren't ready or they don't want to go this far, you've got a 108 Beyer with a horse that just won his prep by 4 3/4 at the racetrack that they're going to be racing at. I don't have many knocks against Mind Your Biscuits. I think in all likelihood I'll probably end up picking him.
Quick question. If Accelerate wins, does he unseat Justify as Horse of the Year?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask because you know that I don't think the Triple Crown is the end-all be-all. I think if he wins the Classic, I would probably vote for him for Horse of the Year, and I'm sure that's going to end up lead me to have all sorts of questions to answer. But based on if he wins the Classic, you look and see. Can you think of another horse off the top of your head? And I understand there's going to be other people that can look at it. The Santa Anita Handicap, the Gold Cup at Santa Anita, which was the Hollywood Gold Cup, the Pacific Classic, and the Breeders' Cup Classic. To me, that's a Horse of the Year campaign.
And the Awesome again would make it 5 Grade 1s in 2018. Accelerate, the 3-1 morning line favorite. West Coast second off the layoff for the dangerous Baffert Barn. 5-1 on Mike Watchmaker's preliminary morning line. Travers winner Catholic Boy, Pennsylvania Derby winner McKinsey. They fly the flag for the 3-year-olds. They are co-third choices at 6-1 for the Breeders' Cup Classic. Our coverage presented by Liam's Map at Lanes End Farm.